Well, welcome to the Botanical Medicine Study course with me, your host and instructor for the online Botanical Medicine Study course, which you can learn more about if you click on the link in the program notes. At the time of the posting of this video, we are full into summer here in the Northern Hemisphere as we have officially emerged from the pandemic. It seems travel is now the obsession for all, and I can tell you here in Europe, the locals are bracing for record crowds, and I'm sure as soon as the smoke clears in North America, many will be traveling about there as well. With vacations and outdoor activities, minor scrapes, bumps, and bruises are the small price to pay for these delightful outdoor activities. And so for this episode of Herb of the Week, we will be exploring an incredible healing gift from nature that has centuries and centuries of use, which of course makes it quite controversial in the health marketplace. Comfrey, or as it is known in the botanical world, Symphytum officinale. And in homeopathy, it is known as Symphytum. So for over 2,000 years, Comfrey root and other parts of the herb have been used to treat a variety of ailments. The plant, Symphytum officinale, and remember your botanical binomial Latin, if an herb has officinale on the end of it, it's basically recognizing its official medicinal use. Now, this belongs to the family of Boragacinaceae and has been valued in traditional medicine for its anti-inflammatory, analgesic, which is pain relieving, and astringent properties. Now, comfrey is a native perennial and medicinal plant of Europe. And in a suitable habitat, this plant can live for up to 20 years. And I have told my students, this is the plant to grow in your garden if you don't want to do much for it. And it will literally take over forever. So this is a deep commitment plant. You must be committed because it will stay with you. This plant does not believe in divorce. Now, the genus Comfrey or Symphytum is made up of about 40 species, and it's native to Eurasia and North Africa. And common comfrey, which is called Symphytum officinale, I would say it's official comfrey, can be found from Spain to China. Now, this is an herbaceous perennial plant that dries back in the winter. So wherever you plant it, know that you're going to have a little pile of lumpy gray stuff in the winter. But if it snows where you are, then you won't see it anyway. And the roots remain, and it will sprout again in spring. And its roots reach down to a depth of 1.8 meters or nearly 6 feet. And above ground, it grows to a height of about 30 to 60 centimeters or nearly 2 feet. And the stiff stem and large leaves are rough and covered with bristly hairs. Now, comfrey can be divided into several species that are used either medicinally as fodder or as ornamental plants. And there are numerous subspecies, but I'm going to only talk about a few here. The white comfrey, obviously, because the flowers are white, it's called Symphytum orientale. The common comfrey, which you have seen in the other slide, and the Russian comfrey, which is Symphytum x uplandicum, and then blue comfrey. See those amazing botanical taxonomists are so creative with their naming. And it's called Symphytum azureum, and azure is the Latin word for blue. And a lot of these different varieties were introduced from the Caucasus and are commonly found throughout Europe. Now, the Russian comfrey, the Symphytum ex Atlanticum, is a hybrid developed from common comfrey and the oriental type. And this type of comfrey does not have any of the harmful alkaloids. And alkaloids are the big bugaboo in medicinal herbal chemistry, pharmacognosy, because they tend to act both on the nervous system as well as have the potential to harm the liver. But the Russians, in this case, don't poison, which is very lovely. And it can be used for animal feed, but it also can be used medicinally in capsule form for human consumption. But if you are a rebel or belong to a certain mercenary group, I would be very wary of what type of comfrey capsules you're taking, especially if the Russians are giving them to you. Now, the Symphytum azureum is an ornamental species, and for obvious reasons, really pretty blue flowers. And if you want all these different types of comfrey, you can usually find different types in nurseries. Now, the Comfrey root has been used as a traditional medicinal plant for the treatment of painful muscle and joint complaints for centuries. And I really highly recommend going to this wonderful website called Botanical Arts Press. They have just beautiful drawings, and you can purchase them. So definitely visit that site. But the root has been used. This plant has also been naturalized in North America, and it rapidly spreads, and mainly because of that incredible root system. I mean, 6-foot deep roots for a plant, that's amazing. It's like up there with trees. Now, Native Americans, one of the nice things that the Europeans brought with them was comfrey. And the Native Americans recognized the healing powers, and they also included comfrey root in their therapeutic repertoire. And a recent textbooks give all sorts of information on that. Now, the medicinal actions of comfrey are that it's a vulnerary, it's a demulcent. Now, vulnerary means wound healer. A demulcent, it basically means that it moisturizes. So think of it as hand cream. And it will do that internally and externally. It's an anti-inflammatory, and it's also astringent. And so I don't get yanked from any channel and sued. I need to tell you, especially if you're in North America, that this really is only for external use. Now, the treatment of rheumatism and gout were added to the indications for comfrey in the Middle Ages. And a very interesting historical note for people who are really into herbalism and the history of herbalism, and you buy all sorts of different herbals. You know, the Nicholas Culpeper's herbal, and he lived from 1616 through 1654. He mentioned this herb in the English Physician. Now, Nicholas Culpeper in the 17th century wanted to give poor access to affordable herbs and medicines. And he was very much against doctors and pharmacists who prescribed common medicinal plants using their Latin names and then overpriced them, as well as the importation of expensive drugs. And a little side-aside digression, what was an interesting outcome of the Crusades, as well as the discovery of different continents by the Europeans, was the fact that they started importing plants and spices and different things from these places. And also the physicians from these areas would come in and set up apothecaries, and they would have these incredible formulas that had like 200 plants and spices and eye of newt and whatever in them. And they would charge exorbitant prices, which meant poor people, especially living in cities, they just didn't have access to this. So that's what Nicholas Culpeper was, a holistic health and universal healthcare activist in the early 17th century. But Culpeper, in his book on herbs, according to him, Comfrey, quote, "It is said to be so powerful to consolidate and knit together that if they had been boiled with dissevered pieces of flesh in a pot, it would join them together again. And a syrup made thereof is very effectual for those inward griefs and hurts, and for outward wounds and sores in the fleshy or sinewy part of the body whatsoever. A decoction of the leaves hereof is available to all the purposes, though not so effectual as the roots," unquote. That's a very, very fancy way to say it would heal flesh if it was even being boiled in a pot. We'd like re-knit everything together. And the leaves are wonderful, but the roots are more powerful. That's the modern interpretation of what he just said. And one of the historical names for this plant was bone set, where the root was pounded out and used to dress broken bones, like as a cast, and it would actually heal them. So that's why they called it bone set. Now, the chemical constituents of comfrey are right here. And the one up in the upper left corner is the big bugaboo in the pharmaceutical marketplace. But another one we'll look at after this slide is called Alantyne. And this is a very, very healing aspect of the plant. But the pyrrolizidine alkaloids are the ones that cause everybody to be upset. And we'll talk about that later. But the properties of comfrey are, according to these chemicals, very, very wonderful in terms of their anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects. Comfrey also stimulates granulation and tissue regeneration. And that's what you want when you want to heal a wound. You want the tissue, because the tissue has been it's been crushed, and you need to grow some new ones. And that's what comfrey does. And it supports callus formation. Now, the one that is really amazing in comfrey is called Alantyne. And if you stay tuned to this channel, or you sign up for the course, the online course, we'll be talking a lot about Alantyne, because it's found in plants like comfrey, chamomile, wheat sprouts, sugar beet, and this is a very powerful exfoliant, soothing agent, and it promotes cell proliferation. And that's the thing you want, especially in wrinkle prevention, but also wound healing. You want that cell proliferation. Now, so I don't get pulled from any platform or sued for people misusing things. The pyrrolizidine alkaloids in comfrey have, in some studies, showed toxicity to the liver if taken internally. So apparently, if you make rats eat several tons of these plants, they will have liver damage. Now, obviously, people who have hepatitis or cirrhosis or different liver problems because they're doing horrible things to their body, or they live in a very toxic environment, this alkaloid will really harm them. And according to the studies, only slight absorption of this chemical occurs if using topically. So apparently you bypass the liver when you use it topically. So oral use is strongly discouraged, and long-term topical use is also discouraged. Now, some medications that harm the liver, and there's a whole long list of this, so I don't know why a plant needs to be, having all these cautions where all these drugs are freely prescribed over the counter, et cetera. But things like acetaminophen, coridone, tegretol, Rumitrex, Aldomet, diflucan, sporanox, erythromycin, Alantyne, Mevacor, Provacal, Zocor, all of these drugs can harm the liver. So do not take herbal comfrey in any form with those drugs, because it will potentiate the effects of the drug to harm the liver. Obviously, if a lot of those drugs that I just mentioned are prescribed by physicians, and they're done by dosages and all this other stuff, so they don't harm the liver as much, but if you take your pharmaceuticals with comfrey, that's a terrible combo. So please don't do that. And if you are on any medication, it's always a good idea to talk with your physician and pharmacist, as well as a qualified herbalist, naturopath, or acupuncturist, to make sure you're not ingesting anything that will either counteract or potentiate the actions of any pharmaceutical drug you are taking if you're taking an herb as well. So caution, caution, caution. Now, the main part of comfrey that is used is the root, which I said, before here. And look at that root. You can get 6-foot long roots. Wow. You can hammer those out like you're making, veal parmesan or whatever. You hammer out the fresh herb, and you cut that into strips, and you wrap that around your limb that has been bruised or broken. And that's how it was used in ancient times, and that's why it was called bone set. And a tincture for external use can be made also from the dried root. You can do it from the fresh root or the dried root. Now, cutting up fresh comfrey leaves into ribbons and letting them sit for a while will give a gel, which can be used for setting hair or used as a fresh topical for burns, bruises, and scrapes. Now, there's several ways to take comfrey externally. You can do salves and ointments, and there's a very healing combination that you see a lot on the market, and it's the combo of calendula and comfrey. And when they're mixed together, they're actually more effective than aloe vera. Now, a completely safe way to take comfrey internally is by using it as a homeopathic, and it's called Symphytum officinale. And you can also do homeopathic creams and homeopathic ointments, and that's where your Latin comes in handy. And I can tell you from personal as well as clinical use with my clients, this is a very effective remedy to help heal broken bones. So if you've broken a bone and it's set and you're very itchy in your cast and you want things to grow together, definitely take it internally. And you can combine that with a homeopathic ointment. There's no liver toxicity involved, and you can take it for long periods of time, no problem. And children can take this, as well as pregnant and nursing mothers, and anybody that's on a liver toxic drug. You can do this, no problem. Now, as I said before, if you cut up the fresh leaves into little ribbons, which in the culinary world is called chiffonade, and you let them sit for a bit, it will give you a gel, which can be used to set your hair or as a fresh topical use for burns, bruises, and scrapes. This is fun to do with kids because kids like slimy things and watching oozing stuff come out of leaves. But this is not for long-term use or internal use. All right. So you can also grow comfrey, which it's just a wonderful plant. Like I said, if you have a patch of ground that, is kind of hard to reach, or you're a lazy gardener and you just want a lot of nice pollinator plants, but you don't want to do a whole lot to them, this is a wonderful plant to grow. And there's lots of reasons for it. The leaves are a compost activator, and they're also a natural fertilizer. Comfrey is high in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And for those of you who are into agriculture, that NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium is K in chemistry. And these are the three elements that make up most fertilizers. And a Comfrey has them. So you don't have to make a multinational petrochemical company rich. You can just use Comfrey tea, or you can use the leaves. And it's a wonderful mulch because it's high in nutritional value. So you can mulch your plants with this. You can also line the bottom of a planting hole or a container with comfrey leaves to act as a slow release fertilizer. And it's also really good for repairing bark on trees. And sometimes animals do a lot of damage to trees, or, so you've got a maple tree and you're tapping sap, or for whatever reason, the bark after a storm, you can actually make a little poultice of comfrey leaves and, tie it up around the trunk, and it will help heal the bark of the tree, because it's been known to support bark regrowth after damage. And also because of those beautiful flowers, be they white, purple, or blue, are wonderful attracting plants for any kind of pollinator you can think of. Now, how to grow comfrey? You can grow it from seeds. It's a little hard to get going, but it can be done. The seeds are difficult in terms of propagation. Sometimes a lot of the different plants on the market don't have any seeds in the flowers. So I really recommend getting seedlings, and you can also, divide the plant, because it's very hardy. You can divide the plant and replant it in different areas. So I have a link in the program notes on everything that you need to do in order to grow comfrey. And again, it's a very hardy plant. It takes over, so anything that has 6-foot deep roots is very committed. So, and it's a wonderful plant. It's an absolutely wonderful plant. So however you wish to incorporate this wonderful plant into your lives, in your garden, or as a remedy for the bumps and lumps of summer, I hope you can come to appreciate this amazing gift of nature. So this is Stephanie Georgiev saying thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me. If you want more information on the online course, you can click the link in the program notes below, and that will take you to a form and also where you can download the introductory video. The online course will not be on this channel, but little bits of it will be on the channel. So this is Stephanie Georgiev saying thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.